In the last lesson, we worked a little bit with unit rates, and we talked about the fact that a unit rate has a denominator of 1. What we're going to work with today is still unit rates. However, sometimes unit rates, the calculations can get a little bit more complicated because you might have some numbers in there that are fractions. So what you're going to be practicing today is dealing with fractions and unit rates and looking at that. So we're going to look at a problem together to get you thinking about what would that calculation look like if I had a fraction unit rate, and then we're going to look at an actual problem that would have fractions in it so you can see what it looks like in a problem. So remember, a rate is a comparison of two different things. Yesterday we were writing it as a fraction, so you could still do that, but sometimes the two different things we're comparing, you might have a fraction in there. So maybe we might be comparing 2/3 to 6. Well, when I make my rate, I end up with a fraction inside a fraction. So when you have a fraction that is the numerator or denominator of another fraction, that is what we call a complex fraction. And complex fractions usually need to be simplified. So we'll talk about what that looks like in just a minute. So we don't want to leave a fraction inside another fraction. We need to do something with that. So that's where unit rates come into play. So yesterday, when we were working with unit rates, we talked about the fact that if we want to find the unit rate for something, we can divide everything by the denominator, turns the denominator into 1. So if I wanted to turn this into a unit rate, I would have to divide by 6, which means up top, I'm going to end up doing, I'm going to write out what's going to happen on the top, I'm going to end up doing 2/3 divided by 6. So we need to have a quick reminder of how we work with dividing fractions, which we did talk about in a previous unit, but we need to use it here. So we want to make sure that you remember it. So this is a very quick reminder of how it works. So to remember, to divide fractions, the trick is to multiply. So we're actually going to turn our division into multiplying by the reciprocal. So remember, the reciprocal is the opposite. If you flip the numerator and denominator, reciprocal of the second number. So if I want to divide, I'm going to turn this into multiplication. 2/3 times 6 is originally, any whole number could be turned into a fraction by putting it over 1. So 6 is the same as 6 over 1. So if I flip that, I end up with 1/6. So the way I'm going to do 2/3 divided by 6 is to do 2/3 times 1/6. So now I can go through and I can figure out what that is. So we multiply straight across. So 2 times 1 is 2. 3 times 6 is 18. Now this fraction is looking a lot better because I no longer have a fraction inside a fraction anymore. Now I can reduce that. So 2/18, we can divide both the numerator and denominator by 2, and we can reduce that down to 1/9. So sometimes you might have a rate where you're trying to find a unit rate where you have a complex fraction, or maybe you're working with a ratio of some sort and you end up with a fraction inside a fraction. If you do, then you need to go through those unit rate steps so that you end up with a single fraction and not a fraction inside another.